all sorts of stuff happening, and basically goes forward.
Hey, Courtney, I don't know if I understood your,
But she agreed that it was.
I don't know if I got your full information on
The flyer.
yeah.
I just took it from the internet, so.
And, well, what are you trying to get across?
That
on
there's
it?
3 potential forms of government that we can actually form.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep, I actually spoke to her this weekend, so. But, yeah, that's all I was trying to get across, is like, this is what the outcomes could be.
Okay, all right, that helps.
May I, who's your chair?
Jody?
Any objections if I sit at the table?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Thank you.
No, we want you to sit on the floor.
Okay, all right, see you.
See you guys.
Hi, Cinda.
Does somebody by chance have an extra copy of this agenda, hard copy?
No, but
I
I've
sent
soft
it to
copy.
the other room, I think,
No,
so
but you
I can
can-
look at it.
That's right
Do you
here.
wanna just make a copy of it?
I think I printed one on the
Okay. Oh, yeah.
You all right?
I'll be okay.
You need a hug?
No. Always, always, but.
Is that a rough one?
Oh, just trying to work through the budget and stuff for the, how we're going to pay for it.
I just noticed that you're missing a finger.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I never knew that. What happened?
Oh, I lost it when I was like 9.
Fireworks? No.
No, not I grew up on a ranch,
Okay.
and, yeah, lots of farm ranch accidents, and I got it, I laid it on a planer, on a tablecloth
Oh.
in the shop, my dad's shop, while he was working on something, didn't see it going.
Oh, no.
So it was another, 100-mile-an-hour trip into town, so,
100 miles?
100 mile an hour.
Oh, 100 miles.
We live 30 miles out of town, so, yeah. That's nice. Yes, I also have like 20 stitches up here where I got kicked in the head by a calf because I was riding it at Brandy.
Mutton busting?
I was quite the tomboy, let me tell you. That was all the same summer.
Was it really?
Yes, it was.
Your parents were like, okay, we're trying to go back.
Yep, exactly. Okay, well, I guess, we will call the meeting to order. Did everybody get a chance to review the April 23rd, 2024 meeting minutes? I did
Sorry
read through
that they
them.
were late.
You were long.
Sorry.
You're getting your public, works one this afternoon, so sorry, I didn't realize I didn't send those out, so.
It's something about the 3-week break, I think, is what
Yeah, it
it was.
kind of threw me
Yeah,
out.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah. So is everybody okay? Any
Yep.
changes? Okay,
I make motion to approve.
okay, I second it. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So let's talk about our public outreach for the June public vote, which is just right around the corner.
Yeah, no kidding.
Is that coming out in in the post office, like the ballot, or do we have to be here to vote?
It's a mail ballot.
Okay.
They were mailed, I wanna say, day before yesterday, I think. is what
Yeah,
it was.
Sean got my mail yesterday and it wasn't in there yet, so
Okay, maybe today.
that'll probably be out today.
All right, well, good, then this is timely.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody knows that it's gonna be on there.
So we have, and our role specifically is limited to informational only, so we are not allowed to advocate for or against it.
Right.
Having said that, there are a couple of links, that we have, including the recordings, that I can work on to make sure we have on the page, and probably work with Alistair, just to get that information out there. Thoughts or guidance on how we do that, other than, like I said, what the state dictates, which is we are neither for or against, we are informational only.
And that's what Chris has been working on is,
I've got a
and
flyer
Kathy is
that
up
has
some flyers.
all the information on it.
Is this one you built?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It doesn't advocate for or against, it just
It just says
explains.
vote on
Yeah.
June 4th. And we have a change that we're gonna just, put on the 3 different types of government that are possible. With kind of like the
And
STAR,
there's-
that's what we have
yeah,
currently.
There's actually more than 3. it
Or
turns
would
out.
it,
Oh, okay.
There's 27 variations, I mean, because you could do this with a tweak or that with a tweak, or, so there's
Gotcha.
major forms.
So maybe we just put a couple of examples, like, this could lead to either city manager, commission style, or keep it status quo, so you keep it as is. That might be all we have to say.
But it, mainly we want to say that if you vote yes, you're not voting to change the government at this time, the city form of government at this time. You're just voting to form this commission.
So I had it on my to-do list as an action item, and particularly coming back from that conference. Do you want me to follow up with Chris?
Yeah.
And work together to do that? Are you
an
good
action
with that?
item,
That, from a government standpoint, make sure it's on the website, make sure we get the information in the paper.
why don't I send this to you, and then if you wanna make any changes or just take it over, that's fine with me.
We just thought we really needed to get the information out there and what people are, so people know what they're voting
Yeah.
for, you know, because right now, I mean,
Yeah, it was.
And now's the time, literally,
right,
because,
exactly,
Yeah.
they just got their ballot, or they will be getting their ballot.
and I'll work with the city attorney to make sure we're in lines, although I feel like I got pretty good guidance from
I
Dan
know.
last week, so.
Because when we had it originally, we did have a little box down there that said vote yes.
No,
And
we're-
Chelsea and Jess were like, we probably shouldn't do that. And I'm like, oh, come on.
We definitely cannot.
So we did take that off, just so you know. Okay, so you guys will,
Is that okay if I just email this to you?
Yep.
And then, yeah, just let me know, but I think time
And
is,
there's a good share of that if we can get that done and get it posted today, then at tonight's meeting, I can say the information is out there,
okay,
yeah,
perfect.
and we can do
I
that.
can work on it today.
Just everyone, please understand that our role is informational only. We are not advocates for or against.
Personally can be. Can
Be careful.
I?
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly do not give up your right to a personal opinion because
Right.
you're running for office.
Yes. I'm not running for.
So where else are we gonna, you're gonna have it on the, like, the mayor's page, or?
I'll work, yeah, we have a pretty general announcement, so we'll probably have it at a couple of different spots.
Okay.
We have like a news section on our main page that we can put there.
Can we share it on the Red Lodge Buzz and like the chamber?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
the
okay.
Facebook page, and we can do it so it shares it like every week or something like that, or.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then is that something that you guys will do, or do you,
Yeah,
what do you want us to do?
With you sending the information to me, I will work with staff and we will get it there.
Okay,
All right, you just let me know if you need anything from me. I already sent it to you, so.
Thank you.
okay. All right, so I guess that will be the amount of our public outreach. Is it June? When is? are
June
they-
4th.
June 5th,
June
is
fifth,
the-
okay,
I believe is the date.
okay.
I thought it was June 4th.
It could be.
Yeah.
But we'll
Yeah,
know.
I'm adopted, so.
We'll, we'll know June
It's usually a
fifth.
Tuesday, right?
Is it the 5th?
It's the 4th, is a Tuesday. Yeah, so we'll know on the 5th,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, I added, business registration ordinance to our discussion on the short-term rental ordinance, because really, it's about, cleaning up both of
Yeah.
them at the same time, so that they all both, make sense and don't have license everywhere instead of registration. So, I guess let me pull up a copy. Didn't know how you want to do this. I mean, Renee, had you already been working on some of this?
So what I'm working on is actually ordinance the 907, adding that second chapter for business licensing. I had a little bit extra time last week to work on it a little bit more, but I haven't gotten very far on it.
Okay.
But I did get through the things that you had written up. Just reviewing all of those, kind of thought as we're going through the short-term rental ordinance.
Renee, do you have a rough copy of that? I'd like to, again, if I can help you with it, I'd be happy to.
907, not 960.
There's two of them, so the 907 is the registration,
Business registration.
and then,
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I have a 907 right now.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
On the business registration? So as it stands with current ordinance, if there are multiple STRs at one address, it is one registration license, or is it two?
so currently it is one. And I think what we were talking about doing was changing it to tax ID.
Okay,
So if it's multiple on a parcel, because right now it's by parcel.
right. So, okay. I mean, right over here, we got billed for,
Oh, did you?
on our portal, it still says two, Denise, so. I know we
You
cleared
didn't
it up.
pay for one, you paid for one,
Right, last year you and I visited, we
Yeah.
paid one, and this year it populated with two again. So, just,
Okay.
I mean, it's not, I know we'll work it out, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify where we were
Yep.
with the current ordinance.
Yep.
And if it goes to EIN, okay.
Yep.
Yep.
I think what it's probably gonna be is just tax ID, like your actual, the property's tax ID, not the individual's. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like if an LLC with an EIN owns the parcel, it will follow that EIN.
So more so, we'll put it in the perspective of like a duplex,
Yeah.
or condo.
Yeah,
Each one has its own tax ID with the county. So it's the actual property's tax ID.
oh, the property tax ID.
Yes.
I got you, I
Yeah.
thought you meant a business EIN.
No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Mhm.
I
Yep.
got you, okay.
That's what we've been talking about
I-
anyway. Obviously, any changes would have to be approved by council, but
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
what
Yeah.
we've been trying to figure out the easiest way to clean it up,
Yeah.
because it's very confusing right now.
Yeah.
And to clarify things, I guess.
Yeah.
more than anything.
And so one thing that we were talking about specifically last time was the timeshare bit. And is Aspen, I was trying to do some research on it and I didn't have time, but Aspen Townhomes, is that actually a timeshare or are those condos or is that one individual owner?
My understanding is that each of the individual units is individually owned,
Okay.
but as part of that sales price, they are also a property manager, and they offer the property management at a lower rate than what competitive units do. So that's part of their sales pitch.
Are you thinking Alpine or Aspen?
Gravel Pit Estates,
No,
Alpine.
Aspen
So
Townhomes is by
Aspen
the
is the one up on the
golf
golf course, that little one on Hole
Golf
9.
oh,
I was just trying to think I don't think we have any timeshares. in
no, I
our
think
lodge.
their HOAs prevent that, if I recall correctly. They have some weird HOAs that don't allow things, and as long as they were in before Senate Bill 300 passed
Mhm.
a few years ago, they can do that. They just can't change it now.
Yeah.
Like, they're not allowed signs, they're not allowed, they have 2 or 3 things that are their existing HOAs.
well, Aspen,
There's
they,
a timeshare on their website.
yeah, it's a
Okay.
time.
So that is
yeah,
a
that's-
timeshare.
Aspen's different. They actually, I don't even know that, I don't think you can live there full time. I think they
That's kind of how
actually rent it.
Chateau was. You couldn't live there more than 50% of the time, because we looked at one there years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's one for sale now. Sandy has it, and she's been marketing as like, it's in the bylaws, but they don't enforce it. Apparently, there's one guy that comes down and uses it every week during the ski season, so what I was thinking with this is, so again, timeshares and condos are very different.
They are.
And my thought process is timeshare should be classified more as hotel,
Right.
because it's more of a business investment, like you have partial ownership, but you don't get like, you don't have full control of that property.
Not fee simple.
Thank you, yeah, perfect, that works. And then, but for places like Chateau, which is truly a condo and you have full ownership of it, just rules that you have to go by, that to me would be qualified as an STR.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the difference in my brain of how that would look. So does that make sense to you guys?
So you would classify Aspen and Chateau as hotel?
Hotel.
No, I wouldn't classify Chateau as a hotel because one person owns each one of those units. And even though their bylaws could change to where someone could live there full-time, and again, those bylaws aren't enforced. So I would consider those a short-term rental, even if they do have an on-site property manager.
Right now, are they counted as short-term
What we
rentals?
need to clarify is whether they will be considered owner occupied because they have somebody on staff.
Right, that lives there.
Available to answer everything for them. They would be considered owner occupied and be exempt from the threshold, but still count as a short-term rental. Because, and, you know, how many, are they gonna need to register each one individually? Or if we need to register them as a group? Currently, because Aspen is on a parcel, they register one account for all of their, units.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just make them upload fire, public health for all of them into one account. So those are the things that we need to clarify, not necessarily, whether they, whether they should count against that threshold that we have set. And then whether they need a listing per unit or just one listing is fine.
I think a good way to kind of solve this too would actually be talking to the fire department and to sanitation and see how they do it. So specifically, if Tim Ryan is charging one fee to go through all of those units, then we do one license for that whole unit. If sanitation is doing one license for that whole unit, then I think we just try and stay consistent with them. That might make it the easiest. And
Yeah, I don't know, I've always considered the Chateau a hotel, so it's really hard to wrap my brain around considering it anything but that, but I understand what you're saying. It's just, you know.
There's some state law there too that's a little gray, because by state law, if you operate a short-term rental that is owned by different owners, then you have to operate in a trust account. You can't maintain your business off deposits. It's illegal.
Yeah.
Now, that's not within the city's jurisdiction, but as a company, we've always wondered, like, how does the Chateau do what they do
right.
and not operate with a trust account? Because those reservations don't belong to the homeowner until they're completed. And we hold each, and Chelsea does too, and Heather does. We hold them all in trust
Right.
until reservation is completed. Then it becomes, a percentage becomes ours and a percentage becomes the homeowner's. So the Chateau is its own interesting entity.
It is, it really
I'm not
is.
sure,
And your understanding is that they don't operate by those rules?
it was discussed like in 2018 at that time. And I used to be on the lodging, when it was lodging association with John, who used to manage it, that at that point, they just took reservations like a hotel.
Yeah, they've always
They
operated just
didn't-
as a
They
hotel.
didn't hold in trust those deposits. So, now that's not the city's problem, really,
Yeah.
but it is a professional conflict, because if the city's gonna hold them to the STR requirements, or, yeah, the city's gonna hold them as an STR and classify them as an STR, then they compete with STRs. So, how then do they operate that entity?
Yep.
Because to make an even playing field, you know, that's, I mean.
Yeah.
And it doesn't affect, I mean, AAA's not gonna, like, we're fine, we don't, Chateau is a completely different thing than what we do, really.
Yep.
But
Mhm.
it is an interesting, it's always been a very gray area
So then that goes for, like inspections and promoting that public health and safety. Like, the Chateau operates like a hotel, motel, but, each of those units are individual and do need those inspections as well. And the Chateau is a hotel motel on our end of things. They're, like,
Right.
Aspen is treated differently than Chateau.
But
We haven't
to the
required
point,
those
you,
inspections.
but like you said, they'd have to have, every time a unit transferred hands or something, that unit would have to have an inspection versus if it's a hotel, do they go inspect every room individually, or do they just go into the hotel and say the hotel was good? I don't, Quality Inn is just switching, what did they do?
I mean, Jesse could answer that.
Yeah, I think that's who we ask is Jesse and Ryan,
Yeah.
or Tim Ryan.
Yeah.
And see how they do it, and I think that would help us decide how we can classify them. And then when we figure that out, then we can figure out how we can write out that owner occupied, or if that becomes its own little chunk,
Right.
where it's, they are unique situations, and I could see more of those types of things happening. For instance, there on Broadway in front of the Lupine, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they filed for like 4 units to be short-term rentals, 6?
It started out as 7 and they decreased to 5, I think is what
Okay.
you're talking about.
But yeah, so same deal, like if they end up hiring somebody that's an on-site, then that might be its own thing, is on-site management. Because I like what we were doing with owner occupied, where we were saying you don't necessarily have to be on-site. And I think, so if we built something for on-site and we have that owner occupied, that kind of creates that clarification. Does that make sense?
Right, but I think, it definitely does, but I guess I just, yeah, to me, like I say, the Chateau has always been a hotel motel, and that's how the city's always treated it. And if we all of a sudden go say, well, each individual unit is now a short-term rental, and I don't know.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, like, maybe that
Yeah,
on-site isn't necessarily a short-term rental, but we're just talking about the registration. So where, like, there's hotel, motel registration, but we just wanna make sure that when we have these, we don't have that gray area.
Right,
So it's not misconstrued later down the road, and Danae has an answer for what she needs to do.
yeah.
So I think talking with Jesse and Tim, figuring out how they're doing it, staying consistent with our other entities that we work with and that we use for
Right,
inspections and those requirements.
The city might want to inquire with the Chateau how they handle their,
Funds.
do they operate in a trust? Because if the city classifies those units as STRs, then we have a natural disaster, such as the flood. Now, when AAA incurred the natural disaster and people asked for $650,000 in refunds, we have the money. We have the money because it's held in trust.
Yeah.
And we can give all that money back. If the city were to classify Chateau as an STR, and Chateau doesn't operate under trust, then someone who has reservations during a natural disaster and those funds aren't available for immediate refund, it could hold the city liable. It's just a hitch, and I wanted you guys to be aware of it. Like, if the city is saying, you're a hotel motel, I don't know. I just, yeah.
What's the difference between Alpine and Chateau? I mean, they're individually owned units and there's more space between the walls
Mhm.
than at Chateau, but
because you can live in those full-time, and,
some of those okay.
yeah.
Yep. And again, it doesn't have the on-site management. The
It-
managers live off-site. Alpine.
Am I thinking Aspen? Which one is Gravel Pit?
That's Alpine.
Okay, Alpine is the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
So Aspen and Chateau, in my opinion, are very similar.
Yep.
And one of them registers as short-term rental and one does not
Okay. Yeah.
currently.
Gotcha.
But they're individually owned units with a central manager that
And it's
looks
funny to
out.
me, because I would flip that, personally,
know.
where it's just like the timeshare, to me, makes more sense as a hotel motel situation, because I'm sure that entity has ownership as well, where Chateau doesn't have ownership of those units.
I'm back to you guys set the policy. There isn't a right or a wrong. There's a
Well,
one you guys set
there
and
is,
then we
because
enforce.
we don't, I mean, there's the legal, being consistent across the board, I think is more what we need to really focus on.
So again, I have no issue
Yeah.
creating,
And just backing up to the beginning of this conversation, how are those units taxed?
and that's exactly it. Chateau is taxed individually. I don't know about Aspen. I gotta look into that one a little bit.
So they're all different
They all have separate tax IDs.
tax IDs?
So if that's how we're defining it, then that's gonna be how that,
Does the Quality Inn have one tax ID then, or like?
Yeah,
I would
oh,
suppose
yeah,
that they do.
yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah, 'cause it's one building.
right, right.
I mean, it's one building as a chateau, but they must have firewalls
It's
between.
one owner too.
not at the Chateau.
No, quality.
yeah.
Quality Inn, yeah.
Yeah, so it's, I think your tax ID numbers are good.
Yeah, I think if that's what we're
Tax ID
going,
or the
Parcel ID.
parcel ID?
Property ID.
Property
Yeah.
ID.
Yeah.
Property tax ID.
assessment code. I don't know whichever way you wanna put it, there's several different ways we can use
Yeah.
that, but,
Not EIN.
yeah, not EIN.
Right.
And so if we wanted to go that way, that makes it really easy, where it's just like, this is how we assign these. Now, if we wanted to have a different category that those could qualify for, that to me makes sense. To where, okay, it's not operated like a short-term rental, it is operated more like a hotel. Now they have their own class, like, they have their own qualifiers, their own criteria to fit into certain niches. Because, again, they do operate completely different than, they have the front desk, they do reservations differently, they don't hold it in trusts, like, it's just on-site management.
It's ran as a hotel motel, is how
Right.
it's ran.
Right, so in that case, it would be, again, we can come up with some definition for that, I think.
Yeah.
And that would make sense, like, again, it's okay to have multiple.
Yeah, you don't have
We
to.
don't have to
like
have black or white, I mean, just as
Yeah.
long as we have it very clear of how you fit into each one.
Has to be black and white, it doesn't have to be binary, there's more
There,
than two
thank you,
choices.
appreciate that. Yep. So, yeah, if you get me a copy of your,
If I emailed you guys,
awesome.
Yeah.
a copy of that, so that you have it.
And then I'll just peruse through that,
It's a very rough draft, just,
it's okay.
I just kind of, so essentially what I did is I duplicated what was in chapter 1 into a chapter 2 and started gearing it more towards STR
Okay,
stuff, so.
perfect.
Definitely need some more definitions and some things, I wrote some notes in there, just thoughts, so.
Thank you very much.
Do you guys want me to reach out to Tim Ryan or the
Yeah,
sanitarian?
I mean, if you want to, just kind of, so we have that, those guidelines on how they're handling them, that would be great.
And it's my understanding, like, just working with Tim, is that, like, Aspen, he does individual, it might be per complex, like one fee per complex.
Oh,
So
sure,
then it makes it even more messy, but like, per property, for example, because there are multiple living units within one building, it's one fee.
Oh, no, they charge us, the fire
The
department?
fire department
He charges-
charges two, but the sanitarian is his one.
Nope, every year we renew 2 health licenses for
Okay.
each
See,
individual.
Yeah.
they're not consistent, because
No.
on another one, they did one section.
yeah, like, for instance, we have a place that has the main house and then an apartment above the garage, so they rent both of those out individually. At the city, we pay for one, but for Tim Ryan, we pay for 2, and for the sanitarian, we pay for 2.
So it's one tax ID, but 2 evaluations and licenses based on how they're,
Yeah. We've had those too, and if, in the past, we've rented it all together, we never divided them out. So in
Sure.
that instance, they allowed us one license, one inspection.
I'm gonna note that this year with Tim and just like, hey, so,
I know.
we do rent them together, so.
Seeing like if there's that,
That kind of messes with that.
yeah, if they are not very consistent on their end, then that just creates a problem for us too.
I think we just have to be the ones who are consistent, and the fire department will do what the fire department will do.
Yeah, because I think if the city says to me, over here, you gotta have 2 health inspections for each living, dwelling
For
unit.
each half.
Yeah.
And you have to have a fire inspection on each, then health and fire are just gonna say, yep, we do them both. Like, they're gonna, I agree, Jody, they're gonna follow. And maybe that was on me, because I assumed that I needed to have both,
Yeah.
so that's how I did it, because
Yeah.
I wanna follow the rules,
Mm-hmm.
so.
And plus, again, in my brain, it's 2 different listings, you know?
Yes,
And, yeah, that's where it also could get a little tricky. But I think more often than not, you're going to see it fall into tax IDs. Like, I think you're gonna have less of an issue with doing it by tax ID versus parcel than doing it by parcel versus tax ID. Because multiple owners can be on one parcel, but,
Okay, so
Yeah.
you are talking about an EIN number now?
no,
not-
no. I'm still talking about tax ID, 'cause
Oh, okay.
Property
Property
tax.
tax, right, yeah, I'm like.
Okay. tax
Not
assessment
EIN.
code.
Okay, good.
I think we're gonna go with assessment code.
Okay, thank you.
No more tax ID.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, 'cause again, one parcel can have multiple owners and multiple assessment codes. And one assessment code isn't gonna have multiple owners necessarily, so.
Right.
Unless it's like an LLC, but then that's under one umbrella, you know.
Yeah, I think you have to go by multiple owners, definitely, by that, because for, you know, I mean, as a standard, I guess, if you wanna make an exception for the Chateau and for Aspen, because of the way that they're set up, you know, with one property manager on site and being treated like a, you know, with a timeshare type situation. I don't know, you know, I mean, I think that's definitely a conversation we can have.
I
Yes, you don't have to raise your hand.
do. So again, one of the things that I think we need to remember is what is the basis for city council coming forth with, for the city, having a policy? The driver. So if we're going with public health and safety or, public welfare, then we need to make sure that that is easily obvious and traceable back to every regulation you put out. And so that you're not getting into the business of business or picking and choosing when, I said,
Right.
you have a right to say, we want to make sure that every house is going to be safe, it's got a fire inspection,
Right.
it's got sewer, and that's, my only 2 cents is just make sure to remember that that's your driver and that it's very evident that that's what you're trying to do, as opposed to
Absolutely.
constrain business or, I mean, there's an argument, you say X%, that's a public welfare question, we don't want to change the character of this town, but like I said, I would say your heavier, your more solid anchor is in the public
Right,
safety.
right.
So I think moving forward on this, we're trying to figure out how those registrations transfer and like what happens if we do hit the cap and who qualifies for what portion of it. Because there's the property management, there's owner occupied, which is exempt and not included against that threshold, and then there's general public. And
Yeah.
so that's where this conversation.
And that's what, and that owner occupied to me is an important thing, because if you
Yep.
talk to people who've been here since the 70s.
Yep.
There's always been people who just have a house that they come out and visit. The only difference right now is they are now contributing. There's a mechanism where they're allowed to contribute to our economy.
Yep.
Right.
Because they're allowed to rent it out once, when they're not here.
Yep.
And from an economic standpoint of the city, that's a good thing.
Mhm.
Because these restaurants that people love to go out and eat, those don't stay open based on the once a week or once a month that the locals go and stay.
Yeah.
It's the fact that there's empty houses that are around that used to be empty.
Mhm.
And now sometimes they're not empty,
Mhm.
and they're contributing to our economy. And so
Yeah, 100% agree.
that's,
Well, and also, you know, when you have these timeshare situations or a hotel motel, I mean, if we hit the cap, what happens when one of those units goes up for sale? and their bylaws don't allow people to live there full-time. You know, that, then you are picking, you know, we are getting into picking winners and losers with our economy, you
So
know.
like, that's what I think is really important. I mean, we've already defined owner occupied as somebody at the house
Right.
while it's being rented.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, from a public health and safety standpoint, what is the difference if there's a property manager on site, like?
That
they-
lives there, yeah.
Yep,
That
that's
lives
there, but, like, yeah, or
Yeah.
somebody on staff, like a actual hotel. Maybe they have shifts and they don't live there, but they have somebody on staff. and
24
works,
hours a
yeah,
day, yeah.
24/7.
Night auditor, day shift.
Answering phone calls, emergencies, all of that stuff. To me, there's no difference from a public health and safety standpoint, what they provide versus what an owner-occupied property provides. So,
Not having those count against
they
the
wouldn't
cap.
count against.
Like
the
a Chateau
threshold.
Rouge.
Yeah,
And, well, and then the
Yeah.
other though, too, is are we doing the city, if we have people that are in Billings that own a house out here, that they come out to once a month or once every other month, are we benefiting the city by saying they're not allowed to rent their house out as a short-term rental?
And so we talked about that last meeting.
yeah.
Redefining owner-occupied as well.
Mm-hmm.
We also, you know, if you want to leave during the Beartooth Rally, or
And-
Chris
and
and
rent
Mike
their
wanna
house
go
out.
camp and rent their house out, some friends are coming up for it, and they're just, well, yeah, give me, you know, throw me $300 and you can stay at my place. You know, they could still be that short-term rental, but they shouldn't count as a cap just because they rent their house out a couple weekends a year and they live there full-time.
So they still have to jump through the registration.
They do, and we
Yeah.
talked about that too.
And we can for a public safety, I have zero problem with that, but again, there's this whole big, there's one element of this conversation where people are trying to dictate what people can or can't do with their
Right.
property, which is an uncomfortable area.
It is.
But to come back and say, public health and welfare, which is what we are responsible for, these are the rules but quite, like I said, I would make the argument that if I go down 2 blocks down this road and that street is all empty, is that better for our city than if they're renting them out occasionally? You know, that's, like it or not, that's the
Well-
business of this town.
Yeah, and it is, but, I mean, I think having the cap at 20%, I think by redefining some of the owner-occupied type situation, I don't think we'll have as much issue with the cap.
Are we
Right
at
away.
20 or 25?
20.
20.
Okay, we are at 20.
So, that's one thing that we were talking about with owner occupied was essentially like it being a temporary vendor's license, very similar. If you rent within a certain period, we haven't decided on a time frame. My brain's saying 60 days a year,
Yeah.
but like if
I
you,
think that's high.
Yeah, I would say 30.
I mean, I think about, there's a lot of folks that leave for July and August or, you know, 2 months in the winter, like, so,
So you're saying like,
Oh.
after the 2 months that I say that I'll rent it, I might not rent it the 60 days.
if, I would say, if you, even if you do
rent.
rent it 60 days,
Yeah.
but I think 60 days or less, and again, we can change that number,
Right,
that's just
just
what
throw
my
that out
brain
there.
says. But if it's 60 days or less, you can qualify for the owner occupied if it is like your permanent residence.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, you're saying 60 days available to
Right.
rent,
I was
not
saying-
60 days occupied.
That's fair, yes. Yep, so, and that's one thing that we talked about with that application, is you would designate when you wouldn't be, or when it would be listed.
Right.
So like, for instance,
If you go south in the winter, but, you know, through the cold spells, you know, or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, January through April, and,
or like
But-
if I leave during December the entire month, but I also leave for 4th of July and Harley Rodeo, like, so it can be different timeframes, but
right,
only 60 days or less of it listed.
but it's my primary home.
Yes.
If I live here 6 months plus 1 day, do I not get to say this is my primary home? That's what it is for state tax purposes.
It, for a certain point, but this would be a little bit different where the city is actually saying, you know, it wouldn't be necessarily,
Honestly, I mean, I'm fine with that, like, if you live here for 6 months and 1 day, and you're still only renting it for 60, like, if you're still in that time frame,
Yeah.
then I don't see why not, you're
It
still
has
owner
to be-
occupied.
Your primary residence, so you'd have to, and I know that Dennison was kind of leery about saying, are you registered to vote here, do you register your vehicles here, do you, I mean, what
You mean the
constitutes
state-
a primary?
The state dictates 6 months plus 1 day, this is your primary residence.
Yeah.
That's for state income tax purposes.
So I think if we can just, again, follow that rule, again, we don't wanna collide with.
But you have to be careful because they're saying state, not Red Lodge. Because state, you could be like in Billings or Red Lodge, and, I mean, and,
Well, no, what he's
I mean,
saying is the state defines your primary residence as 6 months and 1 day.
right,
But she's saying if the majority of that 6 months is in Billings,
And,
then I count as a resident of
Of
the
Billings.
state, even though.
yeah.
yeah,
Because
you're
the-
Billings
because
resident,
the
not
state
Red Lodge
doesn't
resident.
care whether you're
yeah.
Red
The
Lodge.
state doesn't care where you live in
So
the state, they,
There's a danger in relying on the voting thing, because the voting rules, you only have to live here 30 days and you can.
right, yeah, no, I'm just saying,
Register.
but, yeah, I think, I like the idea of them stipulating when their house will be rented.
Yep.
Because that is more clear, like, and it has to be under, you know, a certain time frame that we decide, you know, and it could be 5 months, you know, type of thing. If you're only gonna rent it out for, you know, list it for those 5 months, then it's considered your primary home. But if you're listening it the whole year, but you're saying, oh, but I'm there during that time, you know, then that's different, I guess, pushing it, unless you're actually staying on site when you're listing it.
I look forward to seeing how council comes up with the resolution.
Well, we're just brainstorming right now.
And I appreciate the brainstorming. I mean, back to your comment, Dave, about public health and safety, I mean, that was one of our, when this 20% threshold and the original ordinance came to discussion, one of our statements was, we are adding to the public health and safety of the community in the way in which we manage. We are on call 24/7. So does that, by public health and safety statute, does that eliminate our homes from the threshold? Because what I heard Vinay refer to is somebody on site or on staff that can respond 24/7. And if that is the line, then where do we land as a company? And that was one of my initial, I was like, I really pushed for the council to take their time with this thing,
Mhm.
because I had a feeling we're gonna be right back here having this conversation.
And we are.
So there
Which
was.
was why the threshold was put in place, so we could have the conversation
Yeah,
again. And see how things rolled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and it was agreed that we're gonna revisit this in a year, and it's been about a year, so I'm all for the
I just
conversation.
think your arguments, your positions are really easy to defend if you can anchor it and say, this is the.
Right.
This is the public safety, health and welfare basis for the decision.
Well, and it
Or
also,
stand up in court really.
it also comes down to, if it's your primary home, and it legitimately is your primary home, I have a really hard time telling someone what they can and cannot do with their primary house. You know, if it's basically you're buying an investment property and it's going to be a business, that's different. That falls under our right to make sure it's registered, make sure it's got all the, you know, we still want to get all the inspections and everything, but I just feel like your home has a little bit more protection than,
And I
it's just my personal feeling,
I have a
guess.
neighbor who bought their house and used it as a short-term rental for the 5 years until they were able to move out here.
Yep,
Where does that, and that's a fairly common thing
That's
it
really.
is, but it's not their primary home
during that 5 years.
during that
Yeah.
5 year, you know, so, and I don't think that there's, you know, obviously, you know, we are a resort community, we are a tourist town, the city desperately needs the resort tax to run, but we are, you know, having to, I guess, work with, trying to, like you say, keep it a public health and safety issue if that's our goal. And not change, you know, and if part of that is not changing the, you know, working to protect the character of our town by not having, you know, 50% of our houses be short-term rentals, And that's not good for that industry as a whole anyway, because
Yeah.
you're gonna have like 10%
Wouldn't be sustainable.
occupancy, you know? I mean, I guess eventually it would correct itself, but, you know.
Starting to.
It is.
I agree with you that.
Yeah.
You're already
And
seeing.
I don't have a problem with the 20%.
Yeah,
I mean, I've come to peace with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And pre-COVID, anybody who was looking at buying a house, they said, just for the record, this is not a moneymaker. You're
Yeah.
not gonna make money. And are we getting back to that point now, those of you?
For-
where-
For
where-
short-term rentals.
Yeah, no, I
Well-
would say that I've always said that to my homeowners.
Can an entity buy a home with the intent of it being a short-term rental and make money on it as an investment property in Red Lodge now? Because I think pre-COVID, that wasn't the case.
And long-term, if you're talking about the equity that you're building in that property, and there's some properties, depending on how you bought them, they are making money, but generally, those are the big houses outside of town.
You know, and maybe the old Carbon County News Building, I don't know how long it would take for them to get back their money with all the remodeling and things that they do with that, you know. That's gonna be a while.
Yeah, I mean,
It's,
I mean, last time we counted, there were 97 three-bed, two-bath, right around that number in our city limits. And people come to us and say, will you handle our three-bedroom, two-bath? And well, at this point, post-COVID, things have calmed down and the nightly rate has lowered.
Yep.
Booking window has shortened. It's like, we don't want to take care of 10 houses and make the money we could make on 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, for us. So the market, we're seeing it correct, just because of volume.
yeah, and Heather Quinn told me that was going to happen.
yeah,
She was like, this is an anomaly right now, she said, Jody, and Heather Quinn. And she was like, you know, we have people that are trying to do, you know, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and put it as a vacation rental. And they ask me to manage it, and I tell them no. You know, because all I will be doing is shoveling their sidewalk and taking care of their property for a couple nights stay.
Mhm. There's a lot that goes into us saying yes.
Yeah, exactly. I think for any of the property managers, there is, because, you know, unless you're just starting out and you're taking everything, and then you're gonna find out that you're spending a lot of time and not getting paid for it. So,
yeah, big qualifier for me is just the homeowner, honestly, like, their situation, if they're gonna be flexible, if they're reasonable, what their goals are, what they wanna obtain with it, like, and making sure that that's a good fit. In terms of the properties, a lot of times, I know we're not gonna be making a lot of money on those.
Just make it so we can enforce it and we don't get sued for doing something.
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that would be the big thing, is we should come up with some of these definitions for these different types of registrations, because I think that that's okay, having different types that are more flexible for more people. And it, again, it helps encourage the folks that want to have the owner occupied, it helps protect, I don't want to use the word protect, but, essentially, it just creates that clarification of what the role is and what those qualifiers are to fit that space. So, for instance, the qualifiers will all have to be derived from public health and safety, in my mind.
Yeah. So is it better, public health and safety wise, to have someone actually sleeping on site? You know, or managing on site versus, you know, a block away or 2 blocks away versus Billings versus, I mean, we already have that threshold in there of 30 minutes, is that what it is, away? In order to
be able to
qualify
respond
within 30 minutes to qualify as a property managed site, right?
Mhm.
How's that work?
We require an emergency contact within 30 minutes from everybody.
From everybody, okay, so it's not just property okay.
Yeah.
So it's everybody, so we already have that built into it. So it just then,
But was there not part of this conversation the last time that it's just not good for the public if there's more than 20% of the homes that are short-term rentals? That's kind of what I remember hearing a lot of.
well,
discussion
that
about.
goes down to the character of
Yeah.
the town, the city. But if someone's living in their house more than 6 months out of the year, then they are adding to the character of the town. It's not just a house that's swapped out every night and vacant when it's not being used, you know? So,
So is that 6 months plus 1 day in Red Lodge, then that doesn't count against the 20% character sort of a thing?
I think so.
I think it's a valid argument for that, but I think that's a conversation we'll have to have with full council. And, I mean, I don't think,
Council's decision.
yeah, it's council's decision, but like you say, we definitely, as we get closer to the cap, I think we do need to look at the ones that may be contributing to the cap that maybe shouldn't as much, I guess. Like the
I like
Chateau
that
or
thought
the Aspen Townhomes, or, you know,
Or
Are
6
they,
months
are they
plus
included
day.
in the cap right now?
Aspen Townhomes is included in the cap, isn't it?
One,
One.
As one.
And what
As
about
one.
Chateau
Okay,
Rouge?
no.
okay.
Yeah.
But if we reevaluate so we need to make sure that we're being consistent though
Mhm.
across, and
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking for, is that clarification, so that I can go to those businesses and say, this is what the rules say, this is what we
Yeah.
need to follow.
because we don't want to get in trouble for giving a Chateau a pass
Right.
when, if they should be,
And they
One is-
pay, they pay a registration fee, you know, of $250, just
Like a hotel.
yeah,
So what I just heard kind of coming out of this is the discussion, as you're revisiting it, is what counts toward the cap, it should or shouldn't be,
Mhm.
and does it need to validate it?
yes.
Well,
And
that's a lot-
consistent.
That's a lot more,
Yeah, and we want it
Of a target.
consistent. So
Yeah.
if we do get, if we do get sued, we can say, well, this is how we treat everybody. We're not singling you out, you know?
and that's based on the character argument as opposed to the
Right.
public safety.
Right, and also, but it could be definitely public safety, because if each one of those units at the Chateau are basically a single short-term rental, then each one of those units has to get inspected. Where right now, they probably are just doing it as a hotel motel.
And my 2 cents would be those public safety elements, inspections, blah, 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 those aren't driven by numbers, that's if it happens or doesn't happen.
Right,
Your 20% is basically based on the character of the town argument, not the public safety argument.
right.
Mhm.
Well, yeah. To a certain point, yeah, I guess so. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the cap at all, if we weren't concerned about that, you know?
The registration is what drives the public safety.
Yeah.
The cap itself is a different.
It's a character.
Is a character, yeah.
Question,
Yes,
when this was brought to being,
Mhm.
was it studied what the occupancy rate was in Red Lodge historically as a community? Because we're talking community character. Because it's my understanding that it's been 30% absentee ownership since the 70s.
I don't
And
know,
it's actually a little bit higher now.
yeah,
Can we
Yeah.
on that
When we
committee?
came here in the 70s, it was 30%.
yeah, we've always had second homes.
So why was the cap
Yeah.
at 20% when historically our community's always been 30%?
Because you can't stop people from buying a second home, but you can cap how they are using it, apparently. As
Right.
far as people coming and going.
But from a,
And I don't know,
From a-
Jen, do you want to speak how that?
from an interaction point though, having more people in the community
Oh, I,
creates a better economy.
Mhm.
yeah,
And it all flows back to, at this point, resort tax, feeding the
Right.
needs of the community above the property tax base. But yet you've capped it 10% below its historic level.
yeah,
I mean, we can employ more people, there's more people to shop at the grocery store and to shop at the gift shops.
and I
it's
know
been
that
less-
part of that conversation, and it is the perception that, after COVID, we had a lot of people move here that could work from home.
Mhm.
But when that happened, a lot of our property values went up, and a lot of our long-term landlords decided to cash out.
Yeah.
And when those properties sold at the higher rate, they were no longer long-term rentals, because at that time, our rent was not such that it would cover paying for a $400,000 house. So people were using them more as, second homes or owner occupied and renting them out, living 6 months out of the year and renting them 6 months out of the year. So there was the perception that short-term rentals were taking away from our long-term rental pool. And it wasn't necessarily that short-term rentals were this great, wonderful way to make money. It's just, in my mind, it was just the fact that when they sold, long-term rentals, the landlords cashed out. They didn't want to be a
Well, they did.
landlord anymore.
Well, and we lost a lot of, ADU units in the flood.
Yeah.
I've talked to people that couldn't afford to reclaim their apartments on the lower level.
Yeah.
So they're no longer in the long-term rental pool,
Yeah.
and
So,
that played into it. I sat
Yeah.
on the committee, the short-term rental advisory committee, and originally the cap idea was thrown out at 15%, which I argued was not supported by data.
yeah,
20% was a compromise, in my opinion.
it was.
To get consensus on the council.
It absolutely was.
I don't think the 20% was supported by data, but I'm at peace with it.
Yeah.
However, sitting on the council, the original resolution that drove the development of the short-term advisory committee was specifically directed to public health and safety. And I feel when that committee came together and was appointed, the emphasis became on neighborhood character, not public health. We veered from the essence of that original resolution that created the committee. And I made my statements and my votes for the record as a professional, but I was outnumbered on that committee.
Yeah.
So then recommendations went on to council and planning board. And that's kind of a quick synopsis of.
And there is nothing that says that we can't, raise the cap, but honestly, I think that just by, right now, owner occupied does not count against the cap. So if someone is owner occupied at 6 months and 1 day, then that will take those out of that. But they just have, and there could be some in there right now that are paying, that are being counted towards the cap, that shouldn't be, if that's the case.
Yeah.
But that's a change in your definitions as to
Right, we
what-
have to change the definition, and then when they re-register,
You don't have
you
to,
have
but
to-
you're considering it.
we are, right, I'm just saying, in order to make that change, we would change the definition, and then when they come in and register, that would be a question, is this your primary home that you're registering as a short-term rental? And by definition, that's, 6 months, 1 day, or, when will you be listing it?
Yeah.
From the public safety standpoint, and I think we're covered here, my 2 cents is, if they ever charge $1 to let somebody else come in that house, they need a license, they need registration.
Yep.
They need to have the inspections, everything.
Yep.
That part, not open for discussion. That
Right.
Yep.
absolutely needs to be there from a public
Right.
safety standpoint.
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely.
And if you run it 1 day in the year, you check all those boxes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and also, Rod, just to kind of circle back, the reason 20 was decided on was there was a stat, and I can't remember,
It was like 23%, if you,
Yep.
23%,
you started to see like negative impacts in your community, and I don't remember what those negative
It-
impacts
yeah.
were, but.
But
It was the
again, we've
character.
always exceeded that 23%.
Yep.
we have.
By the nature of our town, by
Yep.
being at the end of the road.
short-term rentals,
Pardon?
we're
talking
30% of
No, but even as vacancies, it impacts the character of the town,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
so.
A vacancy is a second home or a short-term rental. If it's not a primary home or a long-term rental, it's considered a vacant home by that stat.
Yeah.
And so, and we've always, to Rod's point, we have always been like 30% vacant.
The thing is, a second homeowner isn't necessarily going to be a long-term
Right.
rental,
No, more often
because they
than
don't
not.
want, they just want it to be available
Whenever they.
when they want to come, and that's what
Okay.
drove that 30% unoccupied. That was above and beyond the long-term rentals that were available.
So let's, have you follow up with what you were going to do. We'll keep this conversation going. And Danae, thank you so much for all your work on this. But let's, before, if you guys are okay, let's just touch real quick on, the budget. Where we're at and wonderful meeting you went to, and,
So the meeting was a complete non-event. They dropped the ball on that one. I'm still following up. I'm hoping to talk to Tom later today on the fire. So I will hopefully
Okay.
have an update for council tonight. I didn't
for,
have that
perfect,
now.
on the fire department contract?
On the fire department contract.
Okay,
And then the other thing that I'm hoping to have tonight is a tentative agenda of schedule of when we will be meeting with the department heads. We did have another staff meeting. Basically, the presentation that staff has been asked, some of it we've talked about in the past, you know, here's their budget, here's the services that are providing. I've asked for metrics to kind of say, how do we know you're being successful or not successful? But as an extension of that, it's also, here's the things that we would do if we were funded better versus these, and also here's the things that we're at risk of losing if we don't have the funding. So one of the things that's part of the big budget picture is, and probably the easiest thing to do, is cost of living adjustment goes by what a market is. However, the amount that we get to increase our taxes is 1/2 of the last 3 years averaged. So by definition, if everything stays exactly the same as it is, and we're giving employees raises, there's a point on the horizon where those lines exceed, and salaries alone exceed our capabilities. And so part of it is being able to tell that story, so that we can then go to the public and say, how do we solve this? Do we cut back on services? Do we revisit what the resort tax is available for and do something more like what West Yellowstone does, where they use those resort tax dollars to help offset, where it's not as constrained as what we have? Do we raise the mills? Do we, if the fire, right now, the several ways that the fire becomes not part of the city. So the city's required to provide fire protection unless it's provided via another mechanism. So there's a current initiative right now that, I'm not sure who's driving up or what, other than I know it should not be us. That there's a petition driven, if they get 40% of the signatures and 40% of the property owners, which takes it out of just registered voters' hands, then they become part of the district. Taxes go up to the to the homeowner because they're paying that additional mills, whatever that mills get set at, to the fire district. The city would then have those additional mills without having to go to the voters specifically for that, but taxes need to go up. But again, we should not be an advocate, or we're just there. That can also come up as a voter initiative to put it on the agenda, to just say, here's enough people to do it, or the council can say, we're gonna put it on the agenda, and that's the fire thing. And then additionally, the council can come up and put on the agenda, we're just gonna raise mills. So those are mechanisms that are there. There's another mechanism that there's some of the special districts that are a mechanism of the council only. So kind of like fees, we can raise fees without going to the voter. You can do that with special districts, where you basically have you put it out there, there's an opportunity to protest, and then council absolutely makes a decision. Those things grate me funny, even though I was part of one of those for the special improvements district up on the West Bench. It would have taken a very small threshold for me to have voted no on that. We got to, I basically looked at it and they were like, oh, if we don't get half, and it's like the last president was determined by 22% of the registered voters. So, you know, how much does it take? And you don't have to get 50% of the people to object. If it was, 11%, I would have probably voted against that. But whereas we only had 1 or 2, it's just, it's a different mechanism that's out there. Again, I go back to, our job is to facilitate this community conversation. You guys have more of a say in it, per se, than I do. You guys are representing the city. I try my very darndest to be Switzerland. My job is to facilitate the conversation. You guys represent the city and how we approach that. And so when it comes to the budget pictures, there's a half a dozen different things about how that can be addressed. From my perspective, what we have to do first is be able to better communicate our story so that the voters come up with what their solution is about how they want to solve our money problems. Did I answer the question that you were going for?
Yeah, so most important though, you're meeting with Tom to look at.
That request has been made, and I suspect we will succeed today, we just don't have the time set.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And, yeah.
And the only question there, that, and as an FYI, that question is, rather than it having it be at 28 mills, let's look at the percentage of what it was on the budget, like for the last 3 years, and use that as a percentage. The problem that we have is that we have an agreement signed, so the only way we get that is basically if he acquiesces. He is not bound by any means to take anything less than 28%, because that's what we have as our contract and agreement between us. So if he takes if let's say 28% represented 37% of the budget last year, if he'll take 37% of the general budget this year, that's strictly negotiation and partnership. He's not bound to do that. That's just
Right.
my ability to have a persuasive conversation with him.
Well, and, you know, in talking with him at the Resort Tax Committee meetings and stuff, he realizes that mills-based payments are not sustainable for the city. He
Right.
does understand.
And so my goal is to formalize that conversation today,
Right.
where I can come back to Callan and say, he's agreed that this is how we're gonna approach it, even
Right.
though this is what we have on paper. But I will tell you that every time that conversation has come up, it has also been, let me tell you what a good deal you're getting.
Right.
And he has pretty regularly asserted that if you go out and look at what towns spend on, as a percentage of a budget on police and what they spend on fire, they're the same. My data doesn't back that up. When I've looked out, I've always seen more on safety and, public policing specifically compared to fire. But there's no point in having an argument. Come to me with different data than what you're seeing. But like I said, it's a negotiation to get them to say, as a partner, we're going to accept less.
Right.
So, like I said, I hope to have that conversation before tonight so that I can give an update on that.
Yeah, will you also talk, I mean, he spearheaded he helped Bear Creek with the annexation too, piece, and he said that the fire department would be willing to probably help with that.
Yep.
So maybe it would be coming more from them, and if you're saying that Dan Clark is saying we really shouldn't be the ones involved in that conversation.
Yeah,
But-
we are neither an
I felt like he was
advocate for or
pushing
against.
us to do that.
Yeah, Tom was definitely pushing us to do it.
So
That we
there's
could do it.
there's different
so-
mechanisms. If they do the 40%, we
Right.
should not be part of that
Well, no,
conversation.
he was saying, he absolutely was saying we could do it. So do the petition. He said the city could even write the petition. So, and he was the one that was instrumental in getting that law passed. So, that allows this. So I guess all I'm asking is if, when you're talking to him about this changing from the 28 mills, have that conversation with him about the other two, please.
I will do so.
Please. And then, where are we at on the budget as far as the department heads? Do they still have them, or have you got them back yet?
They have the one thing, I'm still planning on having those out by the end of the month. The most
Okay.
significant difference that you're gonna see versus duplicating, basically transferring last year's to this year's, is that we're gonna increase the salaries with the assumption that the union negotiations are gonna include an increase. This year, the COLA was 4%, correct? So rather than being a 3% on the salaries, this year it'll be a 4% on the salary. There's also a discussion about increasing that, bumping that $1.50. By the way, I have a union negotiation later today as well. The data that we pulled together from representative towns does not back up that we're as out of whack as they initially proposed and came to us.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the discussion. But basically what'll happen is, when we hand that first draft budget out that we're required by resolution to provide by the end of May or before June, or whichever the phrasing is, it's going to assume worst-case scenario of those salaries. And then, so basically, the one piece of guidance we did get is when you build your budget, you do salaries first, you do your big projects, and then you figure out what's left for everything else. So that's the extent of the detail we got at this point.
Okay. So, how is it looking, though? I mean, is it, The
on your,
budget.
give me more. We
We
don't, we
He's
don't
like,
have
how
enough
ugly-
money.
how
We don't
ugly
have-
is it?
How bad is it, I guess, is what I'm
Uh-huh.
asking.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, we don't have any major cash windfalls that we were unaware of.
Any
I'm looking forward to
municipalities
seeing
win lottery?
Pardon? I don't know that I could justify
By lottery
spending tax dollars on lottery tickets. I think that's outside of our fiduciary guidelines.
Probably. All right.
But we're rooting for you to win and make a large donation. That helps.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? I know we went over.
That's okay. I'd rather go over and talk it out.
I will be gone next meeting, just FYI, I'm gonna be out of town.
Oh, fun. Anywhere exciting?
Guiding a trip in Austria.
That is exciting.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Oh, that's cool. I will
Yeah.
be here forever.
I know.
don't have to respond 24/7.
I know. I have to go up in the market, so I can't find these.
I will be here all day today, so.
Okay.
I can do those right now.
Is your
Okay.
meeting officially closed?
Can I
Yes,
shut this
yes,
off?
yes.